Hey, it's Chappie's Crypto again for episode 12 of my trading journals. Series where I go over my trades using the ICT mentorship series, and I'm doing my best to learn his trading strategies, and I'll get straight into it with just my results for last night's session. Pretty ordinary session, I have to say. It took a couple of pretty crappy trades, but overall still finished the night slightly up, which is good. I got to the end of the session and I actually checked my summary and realized I was slightly down, so I traded a little bit longer than normal and took one last trade just to get me into profitable positions. So yeah, a little bit of a frustrating night. However, I'll just go over this. So this is for the night of the 23rd, I apologise. It's the 5th of August today, so these trades were the night of the 4th and the morning of the 5th of August Australian time, and it was trading the Nasdaq eMicro mini contract, and I also am trading my demo account. So I'll get straight into it. I'll just want to make sure this is working so you can actually, I don't know what's going on with that, but anyway, I'll do my best to try and give me 2 seconds. Apologise for this, just technical issue here, just trying to get my brush on the screen working properly. For people that are Mac users that wonder how people like me draw on the screen, this is the tool that I use. It's called the Screen Brush, which allows you to draw just on top of any app. So anyway, there you go, tricks of the trade. Problem with your live streaming, you just got to do things live. Okay, so this is my results for last night. So $48 profit, pretty ordinary night. I had a couple of really nice trades, but then I also took a couple of hits. So this is the profit, 673 total profitable trades, $590 losing trade. So in all, it ended up with a bad position. So when you look at my trade history there, the only trade I'm not going to review is this one, the $18 loss, because it was literally just an accident, and that I still had a trade set up and it executed, and I just, as soon as I realized, I closed it. So that was a no setup trade there, so I'm not going to review that one, but the rest of them I'll go over to the best of my ability. So let's get into it. Review for last night. To be brutally honest, I probably overtraded here, and this is one of the things I've obviously trying to learn and get better at, is to not overtrade. I do notice that people that are really good traders tend to take a lot less setups than me, so that's one thing I need to really reflect on. So I'll just show the way I'd set up my, just thinking about the chart or the session before the session started. So just remembering that when I'm looking at this chart last night, I wasn't seeing this, because I was doing this before the market actually opened. So this this is 8:30 New York time. So when I looked at the charts, I actually go up to the daily, work my way down, identified this as a fair value gap on the 1 hour chart. So I drew that on the chart. I identified this as a fair value gap. This is on the 15-minute chart. So here you go, this one here. That there, I drew that on. I drew this on as well, and I drew it as a longer rectangle. That's a 1 hour fair value gap that was identified, just so that when I go down to the lower time frames, those points of interest become very obvious. And so if I'm looking for a particular target, it just saves me having to zoom in and out all the time. The other thing I do on the 15-minute is I have marked the previous high before this market opened, and I marked the previous low. So it's a bit of a tricky one here in the market just before open, because it had formed this high, which is obvious. It formed this low and it started to move up. So we had a pretty tight range there. Now, if you're based on the stuff that I've been learning so far, really in an ideal world, you would look for a break of this range before you'd start to look for possible trade setups. And if you're just looking on the 15-minute chart, there's a pretty nice little setup here. If you were just trading that particular time frame, you would notice here, apologize, start with that. You'll notice here that we've got this break of this range. Price came down, came up, broke market structure. So if you watch the ICT trading series, you know what I mean. That's a short little tiny high. So we've got a little I don't really understand order blocks properly yet. However, that's a market structure break. And so what you would look for if you're thinking the market's going this direction is if the price comes back down here and attacks this fair value gap, which it did here, that would be a long entry. And if you took that long, you probably could target this as a target or that as a target. And if you look at what happened, it did do that in the overnight session, so you would have had to hold this past 4:30. So for me, in my trading, I wouldn't have done that necessarily because I'm usually done by lunchtime. However, if you're a bit of a longer term, maybe just 1 or 2 trades a day type of trader, that would have been a really nice trade. You could have actually just had a nice target there. It would have hit around 3 or 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon, and you would have just taken the profits. So that was on the 15 minutes. So for me though, obviously I just look at the 15 minutes initially just to set up the session. So I was looking at that range. And let's go down into the 1 minute. Now, one thing I'll have to confess, which I'll show you, I was watching the charts a few hours before a market open. I thought I was going to be a little bit smart. I saw what looked like a good setup, and I took the trade. Unfortunately, it went against me, so I'll just quickly review that one so you can see what happened there. As I've talked about before, these videos are about me reflecting on my trades and trying to learn from my mistakes, essentially. And this definitely was a night where I made a few shockers, but it's really good to review. So this is the trade I took before the market actually opened, and a little bit frustrating. This is a classic example when you get stopped out and the market moves exactly where you thought it was going to. So I'd actually seen the price has actually done this. It's formed 2 tittle highs. I thought in this instance that we're probably going to go this direction. So for me, I'd sort of realize here, if the price comes down here, we've got a little market structure break. Price comes up here, we've got a nice big fair value gap, and I opened the charts at about this point, or actually opened the charts about there and started to look. And within a couple of minutes, I noticed this fair value gap. Price was hanging around here. I said, hey, this might be a good opportunity to take a little long. So I bought 3 contracts at this point. Just full disclaimer, I'm trading a demo account, mind you, and I set my stop loss just below here. And of course, about 15-20 minutes later, came down here, wick down, obviously cleared out this liquidity, took out my position, which is lovely of the market, and then it exactly went where I thought it might have. So it was a little bit frustrating. However, I just slapped myself on the hand, said you shouldn't be trading this time anyway. So I just, I went back to my business and I didn't look at the charts again until just before market open. I actually ended up having a little bit of a nap between this time and this time, which was good. So I got a good 2-hour sleep in. And I do trade, as people know that have been watching my videos, the NASDAQ. So that was between about 8:30 and 10:15 Australian time. Woke up at about this point, opened the charts, opened up here, started to look at the charts, and I'd marked out these levels that I showed right at the start. So my first trade was a winning trade, which was a good one to start with after that little dodgy one at the start. Price came down here. Once again, I'm really reflecting on the fact that I need to learn this lesson. I'm over trading, particularly in the start of a session. So although price had come down here, that's sort of the range. I need to reflect on this, and I'll do my best to try and hold true to this tonight in the tonight session. Wait for the price to break these ranges. So I didn't do that. I saw the price come down here. I saw, it's one of those things when you look back at your trades, you sort of, this trade worked out, but it only worked out because I set my stop loss a bit higher than normal. So, we're trading down here. We've got this. I convinced myself that's a break of market structure. There was actually a fair value gap here. So it's a nice, decent sized fair value gap. Price did trade up into that. Place a short. Does this meet all the rules? Not necessarily. If you're, I don't know, so met my rules in this instance. However, probably being a bit ambitious, it still ended up taking a win. However, if I was going to be really strict, I probably should have set my stop there. And if I'd done that, I would have got stopped out within only a few minutes of placing that trade. However, what I did do is I actually set my stop back up above this level. And the reason I did is I had this fair value gap here, which was my entry, and I noticed there was another fair value gap up here. So I just thought to myself, well, let's place my stop just above that previous fair value gap rather than this, because that wasn't giving it much room to move. So I placed 3 contracts there, got up, didn't hit the stop, moved back to where I want, and luckily for us, it actually for me, it traded below that range we had previously identified, and I took out, and I noticed it was coming. This green line is actually the market price at midnight. And so as it got quite close, I actually timed that exceptionally well. So I sold one of the contracts at that point, I bought it back at that point. So I locked in $112 profit. I thought it may have done this. I thought it might have done this one more time and take one more bump and take out the overnight midnight price, but it didn't. Moved against me, and it started to move up closer to here. I just cut the whole trade, and I just wanted to make sure I locked in that profit. So effectively, my proper first trade was a profitable one. And then this is when it got messy. So the price was really choppy for the next probably 2 hours or so, or an hour and a half. Fairly over ambitious here. It's just a really good example when the price is choppy. Maybe just take some profits when you're in profit, because of all of these trades, or most of the trades I took last night, at one point in every one of the trades, I was actually in a reasonably good state. I had a pretty good high profit, and I just didn't close the trade out because it hadn't hit my target. So this setup here, this one actually was something that met my criteria, because price had broken this range, which we identified. So that's a range. So it broke down through. It had come back out. So we've got a market structure. Well, this is really the market structure break, but I'll call this the market structure break. Well, that's not true. It's this one. Came up here. It hit this fair value gap, which is actually where I got out of this trade. And I only really realized this because as I took close this out, look back over here, see this big fair value gap, had a quick down here, liked the fact that it broke in this range, and I took a short there. Now, on retrospect, when I look back at this now, which is obviously the next day, I did notice when I look at this is ideally what I probably in an ideal world would have wanted to see is the price come down here, break that, and then look for a fair value gap. That would have been probably a more sensible entry. And unfortunately, I'd placed my stop just above this level, and price came down. I was about $200 or $300 in profit, and it reversed and stopped me out. So I ended up losing $90 on that. I had 4 contracts on that trade. One of the things I have done the last few nights is, as I've traded the session, I've slowly got my position size larger and larger, just as I get a bit more feel for the market. I just was struggling last night; wasn't quite getting the right feel, and I just wasn't reading the market. It was just very, very choppy. Anyway, let's go on to the next trade I took. So that was this here was that one trade, which, as I said, locked in lost $90, and then my next position was this one. This time I felt like this is just, I suppose it's showing the immaturity or the beginner nature of my trading, particularly using ICT. So I convinced myself that we'd had a market structure break up to the upside. Price had come down here. We've got a big fair value gap just here, and so I took a long position there. Similarly to this very previous trade, it did go direction. I'm sitting here thinking, how good's this? I've picked a trade, thinking that if we get up here, I might take out 1 or 2 positions. Didn't quite get there, and it started to break down. I had my stop loss set just before this previous low, and I took a $385 hit. So that one hurt a little bit. It was a bit frustrating. However, at this point, I sort of reminded myself about the power of 3 rule. And if you look at the whole movement of the price and how this candle may be forming, I sort of had suggested in my own head, I'd say, the price is, the candle so far has done this. So price is kind of like this. And if you imagine what a candle looks like, or it's really poor, but just imagine this, the price has done this, and then it's doing this sort of shape. That's what I thought, and it's probably going to come like that. So I'm thinking this is what this candle is going to look like. It hadn't quite hit the, it hadn't broken through this overnight on the midnight price when I took this short position or sell these 6 contracts, because I just made the decision, you know what, I think price is actually going to come down all the way down through here and break through this price level. I noticed this fair value gap wasn't following my rules, so I was being very naughty last night. Price did come back, I took a trade here because of this fair value gap. Lucky for me, I actually placed my stop up here. So if I'd actually got stopped out, I would have finished that night pretty messy. But in the end, it actually ended up going the way I wanted because the price actually did behave the way I thought it might have, where it did this. I had identified from the previous when I did my setup is that it's a fair value gap I'd marked out on a higher time frame, so I'd actually had my target down here. So I put an order, a limit order to sell 3 contracts, or buy 3 contracts, I should say there. So that was half of this position. I locked in a nice $378 profit, which is awesome. On retrospect, and you can always cry over spilt milk, of course. It would have been nice. I was up $600 or $700 in that position at that point. I took half out, thinking that we may have this continue down that direction. So I said, let's just let 3 contracts run a bit. I moved my stop in front of my position, so I'd actually moved my stop down at this level here, and it did come back up here and close me out, which in the end turned out to be the right decision. So I locked another $50 profit in there. At this stage, I'd almost decided to call a night. However, I did check my balance, and at that stage I was actually still slightly down for the whole session. I think I was down about, must have been around $50 or something. I can't remember exactly, but I was down slightly. So what I did do, and I didn't actually mark the profit on that last trade, I took another position, sucker for punishment, of course. However, this time I took another sell here. Oops, apologize for that. I took another sell just here. At this position here, and for me the reason I did that is we've got another fair value gap just identified here. I did place the stop just at this level, so I've entered just here thinking, you know what, prices, even though I've been stopped out and taking some profit here, there's a fair chance that this, because of this fair value gap is being met, this price might reverse the other way. Now I've got a bit rogue, so I need to really check myself when I trade in this next session, because I think I was just taking whatever I could see. Luckily for me, this trade played out, didn't hit my stop, which was up here, came back down this direction. At this point, it hit this, if you imagine the price is coming this direction, and I noticed over here that this fair value gap had been traded through, or it looked like it was going to be traded through, so I just cut the trade. I took one out at that point. It kept on going. I noticed this resistance here, thinking, this may be done down here, so I just closed that out at that point. I'll just double check, because I have a feeling that, let's look at this, I didn't actually make a note of that one. It was a $77 profit, so this last trade here ended up being a $77 profit contract, or that's what I took away from that last position, which was kind of cool. $77.50, I'll just make sure I mark that properly. Apologize, 77.50. And then with that last trade, I ended up getting back into profit for the session, and I finished with that $48 profit for the whole session. So yeah, on reflection, overtraded. If I look back at this and just think through, what would have been an ideal setup if I'm sort of sticking to my rules here. There was this, if you look, let's have a look to see what we can see. We've got, this is not pre-scripted, so I've got this break. Price didn't break through here properly, so that all of this really is invalid. We've got this breakthrough. Okay, this starts to become interesting. Not much going down here. I'd probably have to readjust my trading range I was looking at. To be really honest, when I look at this, there's probably not really a trade in that session. If I go up to the higher time frames, even though I took trades, if I was going to be true to my rules that I'm trying to learn here, let's see if there's one on the 5-minute. And when we look through here, that's my initial range, broke the range. No, that's not really valid, as this is the break of structure, break on the bottom side. So for me, when it does this, when it breaks down below here, I'm thinking price is going to then head that way. So what I'll be looking for is this there. Okay, that's a trade. So, and I think I identified that on the larger 15-minute time frame. So the reason that's this is actually where you take the long, if you're going to ignore all the rules and trade during the lunch session. So on the 5-minute, this is definitely a setup if you were actually watching the market through this time. ICT does talk about not necessarily taking any positions during this time of the day, and even through to about 1:30. So that's probably, you would have missed that if you were following that rule. However, if you just purely look at this price action, prices come down, broken this, moved up, come down, broke this market structure, which is one of the rules, come down here, attack this fair value gap, which is that's a really good entry. And similarly, you could have a target here and target there, and you would have had a nice trade. And that would have just been one nice, fairly low risk trade for this session versus the rubbish that I did last night. So there you go. That was my session for last night, and I look forward to trading again tonight. Sorry, I apologize for the lengthy video. And until next time, this is Chappie's Crypto signing out. Bye for now. So just people that are still watching, my plan is I'm just going to mark up the chart for tonight's session. We're probably an hour before I start to look to trade again, but I'll just go through the process and start marking out the chart, because it is past, truly past midnight. And when I look at this, I've marked the price at midnight. So this green line that I've got on my charts here, I've got a 15-minute. And I've marked where price at midnight was, and I'll just extend that out so that as the market opens, I've got that as a reference point. Interestingly, overnight, you'll notice here that the price, so I'm looking at the Nasdaq, price has actually done a reasonable movement in the overnight, which is actually doesn't typically move that. I mean, it sometimes does, but that's a fairly substantial movement for the overnight. So this will be pretty interesting to see what happens with price in this next session when the market actually does open. So what I do here as I'm setting up, I've got these other lines that I've drawn. I move these around a lot, so I'll just get rid of them for the moment. And I start just to mark off where the previous highs are, and as I get closer to market open, I'll adjust those so that as soon as this green line gets drawn by this indicator, I'll adjust this to be the last previous low before open. This will become the last previous high, which then will become the range, the range I'm looking for potential setup. So this range at the moment, assuming the market open, the next candle, which it won't. However, as this starts to move, we get to 8:30, and then I'll adjust these lines. I do this because I don't mind a bit of busyness on my charts. I know that ICT likes to have naked charts. He's been doing this for a long time, so he's a very experienced trader. But for me, as a novice, I do find the lines are reasonably helpful to create these anchor points. I will have a quick look at the daily, so we can see what's going on here. You'll notice that I've marked on my daily chart some of these fair value gaps from a while ago. So that's the reason I've got this, is when I go down to the lower time frames, as price gets near here, that becomes points of interest where our price will probably draw to. This is really interesting because price, you look at this, price is doing this, so price will most likely end up and head up to this area, because this when you look at lots of charts, this tends to be where price will draw to. So if you had to ask me over the next couple of days, where's my bias, I'm probably going to be long. However, we may have a bit of work here before it does get all the way up there, because we've got some of these gaps down here. Not gaps, officially gaps. These are some fair value gaps in some lower time frames, but that's the daily fair value gap that's there. Go down to the 1 hour. Let's see what we got. One of the things you need to remember if you're marking your charts the way I do is that once it does get traded through, it's a good idea to delete the rectangle you've drawn on the screen. This hasn't been traded through yet, so that's still valid as a possible target. That 15 minutes still valid as a possible target, as well as this 1 hour. So I'll keep them on the chart. We've got no other action there for me to mark out necessarily. I'm just going to scroll out to see on the 1 hour what was happening with price over here, just to see if there's a potential draw for the price to move. So there's still, from back at this time, there's this massive big fair value gap, excluding this little tiny crossover. But there's a big, we're right in the middle of this, and we've been trading in the middle of this for quite a few days now. So price has still got a fair way to go. So I might just mark off this. What I do to do that, I'll just put the cursor just there, and on the Mac, I'm on a Mac using the TradingView app, so I'll just mark that. The reason I mark that for me personally is just that the reasonable chance that price is going to be drawn up to here to that level. So I'll just note that I've got it drawn on the chart now. So when I'm looking back at it right in the time frame we're at the moment, I just note that as something that price may draw to, and I'll just be interested to see what it does. So that's this line I've just drawn just there. So we've got this as that fair value gap on the daily. We've got this, which is the top of that fair value gap range from 1 hour chart from quite a few weeks ago. And we've got this 1 hour fair value gap that I've got a couple of targets or points of interest that'll be interesting to keep an eye on. This for me, this big draw up here, is price going to return down to here before it moves on again? who knows? We'll see tonight. But I look forward to jumping in there. So as I said, although I sort of signed off already, I just wanted to mark out the charts before I go and do something else. So until then, bye for now. It's Chappie's Crypto, and catch you later.